On the other side of toxic Christianity, I found myself faced with one question. Now what? This podcast is about that question. We have conversations with folks who are asking themselves the same things. We're picking up the pieces of a fractured and fragmented faith. We're finding treasure in what the church called trash, beauty and solidarity in people and places we were told to fear, reject, and dismiss. I'm Tammy Spencer Helms, and this is Life After 11. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this episode of Life After 11. I'm your host, Tammy Spencer Helms, and I'm joined by my homie, Faye. We're new homies, but we homies, I can already tell. And so we're going to jump in this week. We are not holding back. So I'm going to have Faye go ahead and introduce themselves to you, and then we'll jump in. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Honestly, this is so exciting. I'm hella excited for this. My name is Faye Juaris. I am on Ohlone land right now, also known as the Bay Area, Oakland, baby.
Hey.
So I go by they, them pronouns. I am non-binary. And I am of mixed African, Indigenous, and European descent.
Mm-hmm.
And my family comes from both the U.S. My dad's African American. My mom is Puerto Rican. Which is also colonized by the U.S. notably.
Mm-hmm.
I digress. So let's talk about it. Yeah. I definitely have had, so I studied theology a lot. Previously, I used to work at a church as a music director. And my background is in peace and conflict studies, specializing in like community organization, community empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'm working in healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And just right now I'm really and I'm a dancer as well. And I'm working to create spaces, with the homies and like trying to create homies, but to basically create a new world. I definitely remember being in a place where I was very burnt out by, we take on a lot, like, and we want to change everything. And a lot of it feels like fight and resistance. And I think a lot of my spiritual journey has come into, there is fight, yes. And then there's also a time to rest and to love. And there's also a time to create, so that when in the beautiful day that the fighting is done, we are also creating the kingdom to come, and I think I'm working diligently to create a space where we can be and live at the same time as we hope these oppressive structures are also destroyed.
Yeah. Now that right there is a word. Hold on, I gotta pay my plug. They look at me. I got to pay them, and we
gotta get them. Come on, let's go.
I have to pay him right now. Oops,
doing God's work.
Don't come for me. I'm paying right now. Here we go. All right. It went through. All right. Okay, we good. I'm like, hold on. Somebody's at the front door. I don't want no smoke. Okay. So here's what I want to ask you, because you've got incredible experience with, well, I wouldn't say incredible experience, but you've got experience within structures, religious structures, faith structures that have been toxic and harmful for a lot of the people who've been listening to this podcast. And I just want to know, kind of like, was there a moment for you that, was it a moment or was it a series of events that started to alert to you that like, hey, this is like poisonous and I need to get out? Was there ever a moment like that for you?
Yeah, I definitely think there were probably several moments. I definitely came out of the womb pretty resistant. I remember being highly sensitive to when people in my church. I grew up in a very, very strict Pentecostal church.
Okay.
Which was primarily, I didn't really, at least in the immediate sense, didn't have much interactions with white churches until much later in my life.
Okay.
Not that we weren't influenced by white evangelicalism, but we would, there was often quoted like, I will not suffer a woman to speak, like that type of stuff was just like,
yeah,
women are not allowed, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, excuse me, and like from a very young age. So like there were definitely points of resistance, but I usually felt like I was within the family, and I felt tension with certain things, and I didn't feel hesitant to fight on a lot of these things. So I would be like, I don't know about that. And I remember having long conversations with my friends, with my parents, and there were definitely times where my parents specifically were like, you're a rebellious child. You need to, like, you know, God needs to work on your will, or like break your will or
Break your
something.
will.
Isn't
Like,
that
what is
trifling?
that?
That is insane to say to someone. God needs to break your will. And they would both say, you're rebellious, and rebellion is the sin of witchcraft. And then there's the verse that's like, I will not suffer a witch to live. I digress. Let me get my ADHD brain needs to keep it.
It's all good. I'm so used to it. I can follow, like, like people who can follow, like when you do the pinball, because my partner is ADHD, so I'm like, I'm used to it. I got you.
Okay.
And just for the listeners, if y'all hear me say the word cis, it is not a gender term to me. It is a vibe, and it's definitely an ontological thing. So I'm also a non-binary person that still uses Black woman, because it's a vibe and it's ontological reality. So if I say cis, it's not gender, then I need the audience to know that, because I just really felt a cis in my spirit right then.
Amen. It just, you just know it's an ontological reality, baby.
Hey, okay. We know theology. Yo, but like, I'm serious. How wild is that? God has to break our will. Like, and you hear like trash like that and think that that's really, like, people really think that that is a way forward. Like, they think that that's supposed to, I'm not even sure what people think that's supposed to produce in us. So was that young? Were you young when that was going on?
Oh, definitely. Jesus. Because I would say I was a rebellious child. Like, I just wasn't the type of person that was like, yes, this is what we do as part of the faith. Like, that's not who I was. I did feel very connected to spirit. I did. And that I felt from a young age too. And so I think I felt like I hadn't, and I think I benefited from the fact that we were Pentecostal. This is in my opinion, we were Pentecostal, because the idea of the spirit being in you and being filled with the spirit, and this kind of, even though it was barred by other theologies we had, that idea that the spirit leads you and guides you and gives you a sort of intuition was very helpful for me, because I was like, I feel filled with the spirit, and that doesn't go away. You know what I mean? Like, even if I have things in my life that I'm like, I don't know, like the spirit is in me. So like, I did feel like I was I think, and this, so then going on the story, my sibling did come out.
Okay.
And my sibling's 11 years older than I am. So I remember being around 11 or 10, and we were very close. We're almost like exact replicas. My parents were also very concerned that both of us were very strong-willed. And both were questioning types of minds. But they came out, and they didn't come home. Like, my parents were like, and that was a notable event in my life, because my sibling meant the world to me. And then they slowly were like reintroduced into my life, even though my mom very much was like, oh, I don't want you to catch her spirits, and like this idea that like it's a contagion of evil. And so it's this fear mongering that you have amongst yourselves, and it's just, so the theology plays so conveniently into itself.
It does.
It's this theology that you are inherently depraved. God must take everything that is of you out of you and create something new. Because you are depraved, because you are inherently wicked. And so they couldn't possibly see something as outside of the white Eurocentric norm as being something holy, being something divine, even if it's new, being something that could bring life to you and to your life and to your family. So the theology also has you see that your body, like the suffering you go in your body, is worth it for the promise of an eternity, right? You must deny yourself. So you have to turn off your intuition. If you feel if you feel I can't love my child anymore because they're queer, and you're like, that breaks my heart as a mother, well, screw you, because you need to
it's all for God's glory.
You need to deny the body. You need to suffer as Christ does suffer, which also plays into this thing where like Christ just came to suffer for funsies. You know what I mean? Not that he was killed by an oppressive system that was targeting his people.
Come on,
you know
sis.
what I mean?
You're doing it. I'm just listening.
But it's just these theologies play into each other, and then they have this promise that this supposedly loving God will take this vapor, which even this God acknowledges that your life here is but a vapor, and will hold that against you for all of eternity. So you have this very narcissistic, sadistic God, you know what I mean, that you say is loving, who tells you must deny yourself, you must deny your family, you must take away all intuition, all body intuition. If I ever heard white supremacy in the theology, this was it.
That part.
Just like patriarchy and all the nonsense, just like a lot of slavery theology too, just like diablo. I don't like it. I don't want it. I refuse it. I rebuke it.
Yes.
Ashe. Anyway, so I would say, like, just set it to the side, baby. You know, oh no, I can't do it. But that was notable event in my life was my sibling leaving, and then feeling like, oh, this is, if I am to be closer. I do remember, and I do want to name this because there was one incident. For the most part, this was like, because I mean, I found out we were pretty early, but like when I would try to be like perfectly in line with God, I would be like, okay, this is out of line, you know? And I remember one time telling my sibling, like, you know, I think this is like something that like is maybe not good. And like, I know I broke their heart because we had such a close connection, and we were always the ones that were kind of like, you know, and then I was young too, so I can't like hold this against myself, but I remember that being a moment, and I can't just be like, oh yeah, I was for the resistance the whole time. There was definitely a time where I would feel like, well, if I really want to, it's like when you try to get your finances right, and you're like, well, if I really want to get my finances right, I can't go, you know, it's like, well, if I really want to get right with God, even though I have the spirit in me, this is something that needs to go. This is something that needs to go. You know, you kind of have to sanitize yourself of anything that makes you, you know, you, or potentially imperfect, even though queerness is beautiful, you know, so that's something I would include.
Oh my gosh. Sanitize anything that makes you you. What the hell is that?
It's some nasty.
So like you talk about this theology that turns on itself. How are you going to have a God that creates you in their image, but then also sanitize all parts of you so you can worship this God? Like that would be an affront to me. Like if my kid came to me and was like, everything I am is trash, it's all about you, mom. It's like, well, I can do that all by myself. Like, you know what I mean? Like what? I can't imagine my little 5-year-old coming to me and saying, I'm trash, mom. I don't deserve what you give me and have for me. What the hell? I would be so offended by that and saddened and like pained that somehow it was communicated to her that I had said something like that or would feel something like that. And we build churches on that. We build
institutions. Yeah, exactly. Institutions. There's colleges that reinforce it at an academic level, you know, like, and this is being sent out. There are missionaries going out to other people telling them they're depraved. Like, it's just quite a wild ride. And I feel
sorry. So you're here, your sister. I'm sorry.
Well, I think this also brought up another thing, which I think, again, shout out to my neurodivergence. I have ADHD. Follow me on this. Okay, so because we were talking about, and my mom's Puerto Rican, so while I don't identify with all of Latinidad, I do have like a somewhat shared experience where it's interesting to also note that from my mom's side, there was not just this idea of like sexuality in terms of heterosexuality and everything on the spectrum, right? There was a demonization of sexuality and sensuality, period. And I think there was specifically a demonization of her as a mulata Puerto Rican woman with hips You know what I mean? Where it's like, you have to cover yourself. There's no one. So it's this interlocking of like patriarchy and white supremacy as well within our theology, where I know this is my cat just running around.
It's all good. You've seen Deacon running back and forth.
But is this idea that like, I know she used to dance salsa back in the 70s. And the way she talks about it now is like, it's the worst thing on earth. Like, it's like triggering to her, you know, because she's like, that was part of like before I was saved. You know what I mean? And it's like this idea that even enjoying your culture and experiencing joy from that aspect is also engaging in depravity. So even her experience of her own culture is limited by this, and her sexuality and sensuality as a person is limited by this theology. So I can of course understand that there would be maybe no room for anything that goes beyond the norm if she herself has had to erase that for herself.
Indeed.
You know?
Yeah.
And erase that for her children in order to promise an eternity of bliss and holy whiteness or something, you know? So that's also notable. But so as I was getting later in, like, I think in 10th grade, I was like, it's official. I'm queer, you know. It was like I kissed a girl in the rain and it was over for me. You know, I was like, this was magical. Oh my God, there's no going back. Considering my first kiss with a boy was rough. Like, I was like, but
this is different.
It was like, woo! Anyway, so that's when I saw God for the first. No, just kidding.
That was your conversion therapy, hey?
Anyway, but no. God and I talked before, but this was a significant divine moment, I would like to say. Ooh, the rain came down, Jesus. Ooh. Anyway, but so 10th grade, I was goner. You know what I mean? But then I, of course, was not like telling my parents because they were like pretty violently homophobic. And then I remember right before, and there was so much fear involved with this. They were afraid that I would leave the faith. They were afraid that I was going to be queer. They were afraid that also they were like projecting this onto my sibling, being like, you are like passing on this spirit to the rest of the family. Like it's so hurtful. There's so much hurt and family hurt that comes from that. And when you think about it on that intimate level, it also, because sometimes it's too normalized in our brains. All these stories are common for a lot of us.
Yes.
Like, this is just something we deal with the family. But when you think about how destructive this is to family dynamics and the most, your closest and earliest perception of intimacy, you know, and you think about how this affects us, it is demonic in the only way that I can think of demonic being.
Something being demonic. Yeah.
Something being demonic is something that destroys love so consistently and so insidiously and calls it divine. You know? I remember my mom, we were going to the store to get stuff for college, and I went to get a laundry detergent, and it was a sports scented laundry detergent. She was like, "Are you lesbian?" And I was like, no, because I was like, I was like, but like, this is how vigilantly she was watching me at this point to make sure I was not queer. Then our relationship was tense, if you can tell, because she was concerned, and she was like, this one. Then I went to a Christian college, which was both a terrible decision and had its beautiful outcomes. Nevertheless, if I were to redo it, I don't think I would have done it again, even though I can't regret and redo life.
Yeah. That's so good, sis.
We had to sign an agreement to like not be gay, basically. And
wait. Y'all had to sign an agreement.
It was a community covenant. And there was lots of other things. It was like, don't drink alcohol, blah blah blah, you know, love each other, don't be gay, you know. It's just like, it is in there. It was something like, we acknowledge, I think at this point I actually don't remember, because the community covenant changed ever so slightly over the years.
Oh yeah, you know they be tweaking it when they get.
Yeah. I can't remember if this was the version where it was like, don't engage in anything, but it was something like, we acknowledge that some people are like gay, but
That's
don't act on it. Whatever that means, you know what I mean? So that was their version of being like woke, and like they were like, it's like really odd where it's like, yeah, some people really are, but still your calling is to celibacy or something. I don't know. It was like there was definitely like we had a few professors that were like of this opinion.
That was the progressive stance.
That was the progressive. Yes. They really were just patting their back on that one. They were like, we did that shit.
We are out here leading the flock. Okay.
We out here leading the flock. Look at us loving our neighbor.
Yo, we signed one. I had to sign one, a purity covenant. I had to put covenant eyes on my computer. So like anytime I went to anything, it sent it to my 3 accountability
covenant
partners.
Eyes?
Yes.
On your
I had
computer?
that on my little laptop. And then we couldn't joke about sex. We couldn't talk about sex. It was like we were making a purity covenant, and the whole community like wouldn't even talk about sex, wouldn't even make jokes about butts or boobs or anything like that. And we would like tell on each other. Like I was in that. Yeah, man. Yeah. When you look back, it's like, what the hell?
It is like watching a dystopian, like because Christianity is so widely just accepted, and just like any of the crazy nonsense that happens all about the town, tax free, is like, anyways, tax free is like, no, that's totally normal. And it's like, do you understand how much like there are people that there are departments dedicated to the ethics of what's it called, surveillance, and we're just like, yes, tell on each other, blah 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 blah. Anyways,
come on.
It's just, and it creates sows distrust, and then you like create this idea of like holiness and like this sense that happened in my church growing up all the time. But it was this also sense of like, well, it's righteous, like you can't let this keep going. Oh my god. So we signed this community covenant. I did join the queer underground pretty soon after that. This is a significant moment as well, because I was in a cohort called the Martin Scholarship, which is like both their way of trying to get people of color into the school and also say that they were doing something for social justice. And we had some dope people in there. So we were in a class, and I remember writing in the margins of my book, because we were talking about like genocide and in general. And I came from a very literalist tradition of reading the Bible. And so genocide is in the Old Testament and is justified because God has to be good. And so therefore, if it's God initiated genocide, those people just had it coming. You know what I mean? So I couldn't, and this was something I always struggled with as a child. This was never something that I was like, well, God is good. You know, I was like, God, I have questions. But like,
una pregunta.
There is something amiss. And I'm feeling like this is a little track, but but I'm gonna whisper that because I know I'm not allowed to say it about you. But
man,
something's gonna make sense. You're just hoping that you can bend your brain enough,
so exactly,
it makes sense. But I remember writing in the margins. This was a very significant thing because writing it felt sacrilegious in the best way possible. Because I was like, if we are so horrified by these horrific acts of genocide and of oppression, and we're talking about sexism in this class, we're talking about ableism, we're talking about racism, but we see that a lot of these incidents in the Bible are actually directed towards specific ethnic groups, you know, and like the way that they talk about them, it feels like genocide to me, you know. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to search for the truth. And if God is not in it, then so be it. And that was me letting go this idea where I need to try to bend my brain as much as possible to be able to fit into this picture that God is loving and God is, and then there's this to account for. I was like, I'm done with that. This is that, though. Really, I did have like a severe depression after that, because that was letting go of something that, even though I struggled with a lot of these things, was so core, you know, to me, to my identity, to my connection to my family, to my connection to this college that I am now in, that financially I don't feel like I'm in a place to be there, but I'm also not in a place to transfer. But that was an important point in my life, because I think it's important to, at one point in your life, ask yourself, am I willing? You have to be willing to let the white supremacist Jesus die. You have to be willing to just die and not resurrect.
Yes.
Because
stay dead, like Jesus.
Stay dead. Yes. Like, you have to be willing to let that happen. Because if you try to resurrect white supremacist Jesus in your life, and a lot of us are trying to make it work, we're trying to be like, well, it's not so bad if they do this. No, first of all, that's not Jesus. You know what I mean? You are having a false image of God. So you can go ahead and decide whether or not Christianity is for you, but at least let white Jesus die. You know what I mean? At the very least, you have this idol that has taken up so much space and has been part of the destruction of so many of our communities and our families and of nations and of peoples, and has been responsible for so much suffering in the world. You must let them die. And you must find out from the ashes of that, from the ashes of that, there will be something at the end. And I promise you, if you're listening and you're somewhere in that process, I promise to you, there is something beautiful at the end of that, but you have to let this thing die. It promises you, it trails you with this idea of this blank slate eternity, but it's not worth it. And it is a lie. And
it's a waste of a life.
It's a waste of a life, and your life is precious, and not in a fear-mongering way, but your life is precious, and you are beautiful, and you were created beautiful, and there is something good in you, and you are a child of God, and that's, so like, I digress. But
you do not digress.
I do not digress from that one. We just gonna leave that one there. We just gonna leave that one there. No, just I've been talking a lot. Do you want to talk back? Let's.
I ain't got ish to say. I'm like, so one thing I do want to talk about though is, and I don't even know how to segue. I just been meaning to ask you about dance and how that was for you, leaving that purity culture, because so much, I watch your videos. You are so connected with your body. The way that you talk about connection with the body in your videos, I feel like is such, it's really profound. And to me, like, it feels like teetering on the edge of like a revolutionary way of thinking about our bodies in dance, because like I've been thinking a lot about chakras, and like one of the things that they talk about is how, like, if something is blocked, the best thing you can do is to move your body or to pay attention to that space. Like if your root chakra is off, then you jump around and you stomp, or you like, and I'm like just starting to get into that, because we've been so disconnected from our bodies. Like, hello, covenant eyes and covenants. So like, talk to me a little bit about how important it is for those who want white Jesus, or who are like, all right, it's time for white Jesus to die and stay dead. What does it look like for us to connect to our bodies? And the second part of that is, was that preemptive to you understanding being non-binary, or was the non-binary first and then you started to enter into this understanding of sensuality in the body and being?
That is a good question. That is a good question. Ooh, this is a good one. That was some good stuff. Okay. Well, there is so much there. And then this also leads to like the second half of my college experience, right? Because a lot of people don't know when they find out that I'm a dancer, or the people that know me through dancing, is I was not allowed to dance throughout growing up. I was not allowed to dance. We were not allowed to dance. We were not allowed to listen to secular music. We were not allowed to dance.
Wow.
So I actually felt extremely disconnected from my body for honestly, for most of my life, you know, like this has been new. This has been part of my very embodied, loving liberation. And being in my body has been one of the most amazing things that has ever happened to me, and continues to happen. It's the way that I find community now, you know, and it's the way that I've like kind of also like there's a body knowledge where even as much as I can get in my head and be like, beat myself up, I still have that mentality from growing up. But like the body knows things. The body does things of its own accord and wants to move. And so like the body is forgiving. But in the second quarter, I actually delved really deeply like into the theology department, which is how I met Drew Hart. And hey
Drew, shouts out.
Yes. Shout out Drew. But that was a lot of that's when I started reading a lot more womanist theologians.
Yeah.
And and queer theologians as well. And it's also when oh my god, okay, wait, what's her name? Kelly,
don't say it. Kelly Brown Douglas.
Ooh!
That's not who you talking about, is it?
Kelly Brown Douglas came. Ooh, I know. Oh, Jesus, yes. Oh my goodness. Kelly Brown Douglas came to our college. And I was pretty far, like I was a pretty active, like a fight the power type, but then she came and I was like, and I've never in that college, I had never felt held before that moment. You know what I mean? Like she came and spoke and it was like, I couldn't move. I was just like, I felt God like move over me, like in the not in like God like this big force hour, but this God, this soft God that was like that does love the body, that loves our body specifically. You know what I mean? And she like a prophet, she just spoke and it was just this like truth. It was just like loving truth, but it was so, oh man, and it was so powerful to be spoken in that space that was so oppressive for so many of us for such a plethora of reasons. But it was her influence, it was Drew's influence, it was like all my peers that were resisting even when we had no blueprint to go towards. And we were trying to imagine a different life for us, and we were challenging the theologies and being like, no, like what if we think of it this way, you know? And actually feeling more support from the theology department, which I'm grateful for, because they were also questioning, ironically. But just this idea of this embodied theology and being able to identify that a disembodied theology is like feeds into white supremacy and white supremacy feeds it, you know, and that if you can say that the body doesn't matter, then you can enslave someone, because of course they can still have a relationship with God and they can still go to, you know, they can still go to heaven at the end of the day, you know, if that's you know, it's like okay, well, no matter what happens here, as long as you stay faithful to God. In fact, the more that you resist the suffering, the holier, you know, like, but this embodied theology just helped, like, okay, I am not depraved. Also, the body has its own intuition. And then my background of like being Pentecostal specifically also, and finding out the spirit is not like a heat, you know, was just this idea that like, well, like we need to be like, when we work out our faith with fear and trembling, it's not out of fear and trembling. It's because we're into, you know, we're creating as we go along, you know, like there's no reason why someone like Kelly Brown Douglas is not like in scripture. You know what I mean? Because like she is part of the spirit continuously speaking into the world. That is all of our duty. And that's why I think it says work out your faith with fear and trembling, because you do actually have an impact. It wasn't that it was frozen in the space and time by a few people. It's that the spirit continues to move, and we have to be able to open our ears and listen and take on the responsibility of the fact that we are creating that, you know, in that space of creation. And so,
so good.
I think that helped me get in my body. At the same time, I was also like, I took one ballet class, but it was by like a thick Black woman, so it was the best. And I was like, I can do this shit for sure. Because if it had been some like sketchy inty, I don't think I would have ever thought that movement was for me. And then I got into global music, and then I started also I felt like a close relationship to like the orishas, and just feeling like I wanted to delve deep into like what was actually liberatory for my people. And it wasn't necessarily Christianity the whole time. And like the story of like the people of Haiti, like getting like drawing strength from Vodun, you know, and like and this also another passage from like the Quran that's like the only sin that's worse than the sin of killing is the sin of oppression, which I was like,
okay,
I was like, I like that. I asked with that, you know, like, and it was just these different traditions that were also giving so much life to me, and feeling like I had the space to open up to them, and just like being like, these are all things that speak truth to me and that I identify with. And that, for me, the drums are a big part of my spirituality now.
Yes.
And like just delving into movement and this
vibration.
Idea yes, vibration, the spirit and your ancestors are with you. So it's like there's this synchronicity that comes during my end of my college years that allows me to be able to play more with my spirituality, not just like for funsies, but also sometimes for funsies, you know what I mean? But like I don't identify with this exclusivist view of like of Christianity. I don't identify as a Christian, even though I do identify with the spirit.
Yeah.
So
wow, I was thinking about that.
I didn't answer that question like almost at all, but like
no, you did. And that, like one thing that you said that's really profound that I want to go back to is the idea of the fear and the trembling, because I've just been thinking about this as I'm leaning into queerness, and even like, you know, my marriage and dealing with parts of my ego, right? So when the whole deny yourself comes up in scripture, it's like, deny that part of your ego that would keep you from growth because it doesn't want you to be vulnerable. That's the denial, right? Like, and I'm experiencing that right now, you know, like in marriage, like that ego will ruin my marriage. I'm serious, like, because it is this, but at the same time, when you are loved fully and completely, a person can go, that's your ego, that's not you talking, and I'm safe. Like, I'm gonna, you know, as long as it takes you to realize that I'm safe, like your ego can go. It doesn't need to protect you. And for so long, we were taught that, like, you know, because the way that it shows up, and it'll make sense in a minute, but like the way that it shows up in terms of saying, you know, I'm going to deny that, is like, I'm not going to believe that narrative that was created in these traumas, right? But I don't have to act like the trauma wasn't there. Like my ego has protected me. Like it's been my friend in moments, and now I'm in a safe space. That safe space is where that fear and trembling comes. Like, you know how fucking scary it is to like lean into a new version of yourself that you've never been, that you're just getting to know, and to entrust that process, like not just to your spouse or your friends, but to the world, to say like, I'm lovable how I am. That is a fear and a trembling. It is very scary because it's very vulnerable to do that. And to me, like when you're talking, like that is what it means for me in terms of going the Jesus way. I feel like that's the Jesus way of that cross stuff that they were talking about, is the leaning into vulnerability and saying love is stronger than death, even if you kill me. Like love is always stronger than death. Like to me, that's like the gist of like, you know, I wouldn't call myself a Christian either, but I am still feeling Jesus. I'm still really compelled by some of these stories. So that's one. The second thing is like, when you talk about our bodies and the ways that you've gleaned from the things that set ancestors free, in the ways that I'm not going to say their name, but I can. The initials are JHP has been out in the street, like telling people that the only reason they're feeling themselves becoming clearer into who they are is that it's demonic. That we have all secular music because it's demonic. The obsession with demonic, with demons and things like that. It shows me how much we have totally imploded on ourselves. Like we have hated ourselves to the point that we are empty shells that are just spewing hate everywhere. And it's like, it's so interesting to me because I feel you on, there is no way that a person could say such horrible things about other people unless they are completely disconnected, not only from intuition, but their actual frame. Like it's really, I'm trying to think, like it's hard to be hateful when you're present to yourself.
Ooh.
Don't you think? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, 100%. Like listening to my body has been one of the most helpful tools in actually being able to grow in terms of relationship, because I can sense like I'm feeling vulnerable. I'm feeling, like I feel my chest tighten up, where it's like, and also like there's nothing helpful about having a system of theology that gaslights you into nothingness. It just gaslights you into anxiety. Do you know, like there's so many people that have mental breakdowns because of how oppressive it is to the mind and to the heart and to the body and the soul. And you can feel the difference when you open up, and when you just like are kind to yourself. Like I had to like be kind to myself out of survival, not because of like how I was trained to be. I was like, if I want to live on this earth any longer, I can't be this mean. So like I need to know what it means to be kind to myself. And as I started to try to be kind to myself in my mind, then my body started being kind. You know what I mean? It actually, I had to like start being like, hey, it's okay. And then I would feel my body physically relax and I was like, they're connected. You know what I mean? Because I would have just tension and knots and like just like body pain. And then, but it was just like part of my life. It was all written into one. I was like, this is because I'm not in the right place with God or something. You know what I mean? So, and then this person like saying like, oh, if you're feeling yourself, it's because it's demonic. That's exactly the type of like circular oppression that keeps people and even keeps families from like loving each other properly, even when they want to, because it is fear mongering. They are terrorizing people's minds and hearts, in
what?
really ways.
Sis, something just popped in my head. You know when Jesus talks about the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit, right?
Yes.
That is the only unforgivable sin, right? Now listen. I know we used to think about that and we used to use it against people who said damn, but that's not what it means. He's saying the blasphemy of the Spirit is to call good evil and evil good, to switch those in your mind. It's an unforgivable sin because a person who hates themselves, how can they receive forgiveness? Like, how could you actually embrace being loved and being lovable and being worthy of love if you hate yourself? If the very thing God calls good, you're calling evil, how do you even experience an embrace from a loving God? Like you can't. So it's not that Jesus is saying, if you say God damn, it's unforgivable. Like that's not what he's saying. Like it's like literally impossible. Like you have to switch and go, I can't continue to say that something good is evil because it completely distorts my perception in the world. And I can't be loved. And if I can't be loved, I can't love nobody. Like, it's like, oh, that's what that meant. Like, it's so amazing to me how, I feel emotional, how freedom, being ourselves, the freedom, when you go back to an old text that was used to oppress you, you turn that weapon into a plowshare. It's like, no, like I'm going to use this to grow. I'm not going to use this to exploit and to oppress. I'm like going to turn this thing into a thing for my growth. And I love how it's almost impossible without coming back to our bodies. I mean, don't you think? Like, I don't know how else.
100%, I think so, because I think there is a significance to being earthbound. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's, and that's like, it's a distance from our mother, you know, the earth, like it's also, she suffers too. Yes. And like, you know, like, we're disconnected from her, we're disconnected from our fellow animals. We also have this like idea that like humans are the top, and this is what that means. And that we can disrespect everyone else or they're inferior. It's the sign. It's all like a microcosm of like how we feel about like ourselves, how we feel about the earth and our connection to each other. We are disconnected from our siblings. Like, and I'm not talking about just like our human siblings. We're disconnected from our earth siblings. We're disconnected from this idea of water. And you won't know that unless like, we could be talking here on Zoom all day, but like, I wouldn't know like what if I never look at what the sky looks like, or that the birds aren't chirping anymore. I won't know that the earth is being destroyed. If I don't listen to my body, I won't know that it's being destroyed by this harmful theology. You know what I mean? Like, we have to sit and listen and hear the spirit moving and hear the earth groaning, you know, like the earth does cry out, you know, and like, are we listening to her? You know, are we listening? But we have to listen to ourselves. It is a spiritual discipline to sit and listen, not just to this hypothetical great big man somewhere, you know, but like, listen. Listen. What does it mean to listen and to intuit from that and let your body respond to certain things? Like when you touch grass and when you touch, you know, bless the people with allergies. I don't know, Lord. But like when you touch grass and when you touch the tree and you feel your body relax and just like be at ease, it's because this is the relationship we were meant to have with it. You know? And I will say something, I think this is something that I so appreciate about my queer siblings, is I feel like repeatedly between both our queer siblings and Black womanist theologians and just Black women period, just being able to like, because being on the outside so much that like you have no option but to play with these things in a way that can advance, that can actually mean you're growing, because we've been told so much crap, and some of it we've like even internalized, but we've twisted it in beautiful ways. There's so many beautiful instances of resistance, in which we found ways to reinterpret scripture, which I think leads to the idea that I really think we should be guided by spirit, and that we shouldn't be so stagnated. Like, that's easy actually, to be stagnated at one point in time. That requires no thought if you have something just dictated to you day in, day out. It doesn't require that you listen at all. And just go. This is what I have to do. This is what I do. It's like, no relationship is going to be great just because you're there's no relationship is going to be good just because you're like, these are the rules that we follow, and it doesn't matter how any of us feel about this. But it's like, when you open up your spirit and you're like, well, who are you as a person? Who am I as a person? Did that feel good for you? It didn't feel good for me? Why? You know what I mean? Like, we have to listen. We have to sit down and listen and be able to make choices too that could be wrong, that could be right, but we have to try, you know. And I think our queer siblings and like we've had to make something out of this, you know. We've had to find ways to be like, well, maybe we could do this and it would be beautiful. And it is often like, I feel like our interpretations of these scriptures are freaking amazing. Like, I know. Like the way that I was like, oh my God, like I had not like denied yourself, like that ego, like that sense of like, well, you won't be able to. And when you said, how can the one hates themselves accept forgiveness? That is so profound and spoke so deeply to me, because I needed to hear that too. Because that's another thing where it's like, I beat myself to a pulp, and I know that can be my tendency when I'm not like taking care of myself, or you know. And then I think to myself, even if they did forgive me, I would never be able to see them, because I would never be able to forgive myself. And to think of that in your relationship to God, and that like this abusive relationship with God, it's not working.
It's not.
You know what I mean? Because if there is such a thing as forgiveness, if we are trained to hate ourselves, we wouldn't have any part of it.
We wouldn't even have any clue.
It wouldn't have any relevance. You know, it's just like, cool.
It's a waste.
Yeah, right? It's a waste.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I gotta land the plane. I do not want to land
No,
this
we
plane.
do. I was like, oh Lord.
Jeez. Like, okay, so let me say this to you. I'm gonna ask you the same 3 questions, but I feel like I feel in my spirit I need to say that I truly believe that you are like a revolutionary. And I don't know how that will look for you. And obviously we knew homies, but like your feist, your spirit, your kindness, like there is something very revolutionary about you. And I feel I feel an honor to have just like exchanged energy. Like, and I feel like you need to know that. Like you it's there. It just feels to me like you'll know times when you go and it's a very you make me think about like Angela, like and see the thing about Angela, and I'm digressing and nerding out, but Angela Davis was so fucking smart. Like and she was so in her body. Like when you listen to her speak, she hardly raises her voices. Like her voice. Like I don't know if you've ever listened to anything, but here's one thing I will say. There's a interview, it's called Free Angela and All Political Prisoners, and it's a documentary. And there's a part in there's another one called Black Power Mixtape, which is also good. But she's in prison and she basically confronts America from its prison to tell it about itself. And I feel like that's what you've done. I mean, you came out of a very oppressive like thing, and to see this much light and life on a person, like there's no way that that's not revolutionary. Like there's no way that you won't spark revolution around. Like to me, it just feels like it feels like a duh. I'm so happy that you're still here with us. I'm so happy that you stayed. And I don't know your story, but I know what the hell it means to be queer and grow up Christian. And sometimes you think about not staying here. Like, so thank you. Thank you. And bless you. And now, is there anything that you're bringing with you from the rubble of what remains of that time in faith?
Yeah. I think the feeling that like my feeling of revolution is also sparked from the time that I was Pentecostal too, because it's just this idea that the fire will take and transform you, and that we can all catch fire. When people say the revolution is for one person, I've never believed that in my life, because the fire is the God is for all. This like the spirit is moving for all of us. The spirit is for you, the spirit is for you, and the spirit will empower you to do things beyond your wildest capabilities, and you'll work with the spirit to do so. So I would hope that we could all take that. I thank God for that part of my Pentecostal tradition. It doesn't have any other mediators between you. It's a very non-classist view of things too. It doesn't require that you read. It doesn't require that you write. It's like God moves and you trust that, and it's all powerful. Just like that has been my firmest belief. And I think my biggest heartbreak is like whenever like I've always, so I thank you so much for your words. I had a hard time hearing it a little bit because I feel outside of my community. I don't feel very connected to community in this sense, even though I know that takes time, but I miss the idea of being with people that have a similar purpose and a similar a desire. We want to not set the world on fire in terms of like destruction, but set the world on fire with like all this love and goodness, and that we can catch it, and that it is contagious, and that when people see it, we will be moved and we will be transformed, and that there is this even though there is a very like doomsday thing in a lot of Pentecostal traditions, there's also an exceptional amount of hope, which is these paradoxes, but like there's an exceptional amount of hope that we can all catch it, and that if you let it happen, if you let yourself be moved, unbelievable things will happen, things that you maybe never dreamed of, and that you have these unbelievable hopes, and God will, like, there will be a better day.
Yes.
There will be a day of freedom and of liberation and of jubilation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is the year of Jubilee, when the lame shall walk and the blind
yes.
and the Lord shall set the captives free. You know, I believe that with my whole heart. So that's something that I take with me. Those passages have extreme significance to me and do guide me no matter what traditions I am in. That is at the core of myself.
That part.
And I think it's worth taking, for sure.
My God. Whew. Sis. Good God. I'm gonna let that sit for a minute. I love the Holy Spirit because you can tell when she's in a room.
Shit. Ooh, yes, you can.
Really can. You can. She's polite and dangerous, you know, like
yes,
you know what I mean? Like that feeling of like fire and love, like thank you, we recognize you, Ashe. Okay. What are you binging? You watching anything, listening to anything, drinking anything, eating anything?
You know, I always binge tomatoes. I'm just a big tomato fiend. I do like my cherry tomatoes. I don't know what to say about it. What have I been binging? There was Netflix has this series on like African queens that has been like super dope. So I watched the one on Cleopatra.
Oh, I watched it too. Yo. Woo!
When we talk about spirit moving, I was like,
I know.
This was good. This was good. And it felt so good because it's like, oh my gosh, sometimes you don't realize how much your stories are not told. But this was such like, until you're like,
they lied. They lied.
I know. And you think about like the fact that like the Library of Alexandria, and I know we have these Hotep boys being out here like the library, you know what I mean? But for real though, like
listen, I'm gonna need the Hoteps to deal with the patriarchy first, then come.
I'm gonna need them to deal with the patriarchy, but also the Library of Alexandria. I really think about that being burned down, like.
Yeah,
that's crazy. And it just feels good to have a accurate, like not just like a more like, it's not accurate to have white history. It's just not accurate. Like it's just like such, and it's so lame to just have one small piece of the story. If you are a historian, if you are a lover of stories, then having one perspective. I digress. I've been binging on
more to the story. Way more to the story.
Way more. And it makes it so much more riche.
More riche. What is some words to live by? Once you reach deep, like ask the Orishas, like some words for us to live by. Like really think, because I mean, we've already talked about who the audience might be that's listening. So when you think about those folks, you hold them in your spirit, like with some words for us to live by.
So when I think about words to live by, I did dig. I feel bad because it's like dig deep but this is the one that came to me, and it's like people have heard it before, but it's so spiritual, and it's by our sister Sarah Shakur, and it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. And if I could say that again and again and again, if you have nothing to lose but your chains, and like think about all the ways that is, you know, like it is scary to explore this part of yourself. It is scary to walk into the unknown. It is scary to decide to be in tune with spirit and to make the choice and have the spiritual discipline of listening to yourself, and also listening to the parts and bringing the shadow parts of yourself into the light, even though you wanted to shove them so deep in because you thought you would be unlovable, and you think there's no way that could be, and just like you feel depraved and all that stuff, so you hide these parts of yourself. You must all come into the light. All of you must come into the light. and come into the sun and let the sun shine in you and on you and around you. You have to be out in the sun, baby. We need sun. And you have nothing to lose but your chains. So when you hear the voice of fear push you down and cause you to not explore, maybe you're even scared to explore because you're like, what if I fuck up exploring? What if I hurt someone while I'm exploring? What if I, you're hurting someone you're hurting yourself by not exploring, and you might be hurting people anyways. But if you make a commitment to come to the light, Spirit will guide you. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Nothing to lose but your chains. You are choosing life, and that might be hard, and you might get like tore up, and maybe the people around you might get a little tore up too, because we're relational people and communal people. That's inevitable. You are not a sanitized little thing that just does perfect stuff. But if you have a commitment to going into the light, and you have a commitment to being kind to yourself, through that process, and you'll find that the community will come around you, and it will always be worth it. I don't digress.
You do not digress. You prophesy.
And also just like, I really believe the year of Jubilee, the year of Jubilee is something that is like, it's just coming. You know what I mean? Like the lame shall walk and the blind shall see, and the Lord shall let the captives free. Like that is the ultimate arc of history, for me. So being tied into two of those things.
Selah.
Ooh, Selah. Ooh. Ooh. I don't even know what to do now.
Thank you for listening. To put your money in your heart is donate to Subculture Inc. and clear the path for Black students today.